Jalwe nam tu rang shen tun je tu chen zo be je yuan den cho bar wa be ma jung ne da le be cho jong do zhou tong me a yang de wa dang yin ye chou lang chu ge zhao be xiang yun den yue dan xia jie yue la so ken zhou chung ni nam la so lo wa de be ma yue sen ge kang ge rik be me si de long ne ceng ceng gun se jiang Chambe paljuru tu zera kunye pa rongsum chu je sangbo kyal juru e che kangri thokala rinchen nyingbe kulo yunden kunjung kawe je saladu nyingbe dendo bembe na juru pa longchen ramjam shabla solo ba debe redong jambale shune chen lam le gongbe longne bobe terje chol Longdo chözen janzo nga wang jiro mi pam jamyang namjal la solwa debe homen chöje ingi pochang ne dusum sangje kunje ngoni Rangsum chogo ngusum donze ba zawe lamme shabla solwa debe Yang Deyang Zhuwa Namgi Tada Nyambe Simjen Tamje Dungal Yunde Nyedang Chalde Topcha Lana Mepa Yang Dakpar Zogbe Sangye Ye Gopang Rinpo Che La Gupar Kiwo Di Che Du La Dambi Che Tenye Senjin Sulishindo Nyamsu Lambar Kiwo Nyambe Samba Changju Chodo Tokye Ba Rinpo Che Saltabe Gone Sembara Shu
At the beginning of class, please give rise to the precious bodhicitta, the supreme motivation. Thinking, may all sentient beings who are numerous as the sky is vast, attain perfect and complete Buddhahood. And in order to free them from suffering and the causes of suffering, may I really establish them at the level of complete and perfect Buddhahood. And in order to do so, may I listen to these precious teachings and put them correctly into practice. With that kind of motivation and the according conduct, please listen to the teachings.
So, tene gang shuwar chawe chue tene jumi pam rinpoche zebi kebi tsula jubi go she chabi ten juice ta tini imbare ta dila yang tangbo tenju dige chen tene koncho sumla chang salwa tene ta chobar joba lamnang chagido tene zambar tamchawa tene trashiba melams kang lamnang chagido tsikjeshi nang la tyonde do joja tamje tyonke ushapji työbi tön tende ta tende mala yang rimba shindu tene shungi tön lebidos me tenang la danda ta shungi tön de lebde re
The text that we're studying in this class is The Gateway to Knowledge by Mipam Rinpoche. And there were some preliminary topics that we covered, like the text, the title of the text, the homage to the 3 jewels, then the supplication verses, or the verse which contained auspicious aspirations, or we can also say that it was the verse of paying respect to Manjushri, and it also contained the promise to compose and the summarized topics of the entire text. So that was the verse that we looked at, and then we also looked at the summary of the text itself, and now we have reached the actual text, the main part of the text.
Tene dila yang tene kesata tiwa shi yore tiwa de ta chagya shi dönne rola dön sikdün time chörab nang vi derersin ta sikdün time chörab nang vi dere kap de la tene chagya shi dönde kandes tengeresen na tene chagya shi dönde ne soso yang dakpa rikpa shi ngone tengeres de soso yang dakpa rikpa shi de ane 도당 tos salbo china kande ina dangong ji sung ina lo le abshira me thuma sung 도당 kande ina ji sung ro nang sine tadiro chini tuwa chile de ta digi lende soso yang da pe ripa shi soso yang da pe ripa shi shewa de ne Sik sosu yang dakpe rikpa, dun sosu yang dakpe rikpa, chö sosu yang dakpe rikpa, boba sosu yang dakpe rikpas, di shi di mingla, ane sosu yang dakpe rikpa shis. Tangbo sik sosu yang dakpe rikpa shiwa dine, ane zo jeje, jeje deki ma jehengi jeje, sik jera di mingla di sik sosu yang dakpe rikpas. Tadi sanje de changju semba namji ane soso yang dapa rikpa shi kone chö sung yongdu tsik soso sewa degi tsik degi ane tsik de la pena je tawa kata ki chacha shi dawu dende chö sung yongdu kap de la degi tsik de la ane dowa rangrang soso ke ke la lu nechen la soba rangrang soso ke ke la sung tupa tang jeje de ane tsik de la chepa lakpo gyun ane dinde kanyang mebi bone dinde jeje de ta dinde sung tuki yube ta je jeje digi mingla tsik soso yang dakwe rikpaas dine dun soso yang dakwe rikpaas dun soso yang dakwe rikpaas shiwa dine ta di jeje digi dun de re penna tawa kata ki chakya shi chao dönde di dönde la yang ane dönde yang dakpar tokshin yang dakpar tokshin dila ane ma tokpa tang lokpar tokpa tang tesum dinde tsawa ni meba ane dön korongi nelu chakya shi penna chakya shi dönde tawa kata ki chakya shi dön kang imba darang manurwar ane dönde tukla yobe ane tila ane dön soso yang da rikpas dön soso yang da rikpas no jene tichela je chö soso yang da rikpas na ta de tsik dima meba ane tsik soso yang da rikpa dang ane dön la dima meba dön soso yang da rikpa lamna jigri yang na jeja dang jeje lamna jigra ta ondi dön de ane semjen la ane 디 코롱기 내당 간데 임바 그러한 제자도 제자 코롱기 만노로에 된 지마메바 강데 임바 다랑 섬진라 마 뜸바르 제베나 아니 된 소소 양다베 리바스 다 뽑아 소소 양다베 리바스 뽑아 소소 양다베 리바시 와데 드네 제제당 제자 된조기 책당 된 된조기 아니 낭와 ki ta ter chimbo yo pas nangwa ki ter chimbo yo sena ter segende ta zoe me wa ke cha ro jiro wa sepa me pa tene jeja dang jeje ki ane ji don denzo ki nangwa don denzo ki don da denzo lo la mangbo ji yo ba ke cha se me wa tu ni ta she yo be don da ro ji on tende poba su yang da be 바 이제 뽑아 수수 양다 버리 봤어. 어디들다 뽑아들라 양 에나다 뽑이 때친 뭐 게스는데 양 다시니 에와 짤 용기도 봐.
Before we start with the explanation of the text today, I would like to answer a question that was asked. Someone mentioned that they would like to have some clarification on the fourfold correct discrimination. We saw the verse in the prologue saying, comprehending perfectly the 10 topics, you teach beings the meaning of the 4 seals. Treasure, who fully illuminates the teachings of flawless word and meaning. Son of speech, may you enter our hearts. And the third line here refers, when it says the teachings of flawless word and meaning, this refers to the fourfold correct discrimination, which is the way in which here Manjushri teaches and explains the 4 seals of Dharma. And someone requested that we clarify what these 4 correct discriminations are again. They are the words, the definitive language, the meaning, the Dharma, and ready speech, or courageous eloquence. And what do these four refer to? The first one, the definitive words or language, refers to the means of expression, that which expresses the meaning. And so what is to be taught, what is to be expressed are the four seals in our context, for example. And when the Buddha taught the four seals, then he did so with the perfect, flawless language. So in whatever language the four seals are being taught, it is the words that are being used are flawless in the sense that with the correct discrimination of words or language, one can teach in whatever language is necessary, whether it's the language of humans, the different languages of humans, the language of Nagas, the language of the gods, and so on. And with it, while teaching, there are no extra words, there are no words left out, there are no flaws at all in the expression of the four seals itself. The correct discrimination of the meaning then refers to the fact that the one who expresses the four seals, for example, can do so in a perfect way because of having understood the four seals correctly and authentically, without any aspects that are not understood or that would be misunderstood, without any doubts and misunderstandings. So the one who teaches or expresses the four seals with the right discrimination of the meaning has correctly and flawlessly understood the meaning of the four seals. Then the third correct discrimination is the correct discrimination of the Dhamma. And that refers then to the utterance or the way of teaching the words and the meaning, so that using the words, the correct words, to express the correct meaning, that were number 1 and 2, for sentient beings. So to teach the four seals, for example, for the benefit of sentient beings uninterruptedly. And then the last of the four correct discriminations is the correct discrimination of ready speech or courageous eloquence. And when we speak about this ready speech, courageous eloquence, we also refer to the treasure minds, the 8 great treasure minds of eloquent speech. And if you have the image of a treasure, a great treasure mine in our mind, then this refers to something that is inexhaustible, right? A great treasure mine that produces the treasure on and on. And what this means for for the teaching of the four seals of Dhamma means that the person who teaches it has really the understanding and everything in their mind, so they are able to teach eloquently and without interruption all the time. They know so much that they just are like a treasure mine teaching them the Dhamma, the seals of Dhamma, to beings. And in this context, we also often speak about what makes up this eloquent speech in light of the 8 great treasure minds of eloquent speech.
Dine the Bobby Derchimbo guessing in the Tole Yuvas, the Bobby Derchimbo Gepena Bobas and Aben Chajashi Twende and Sim la Yang Chimbache Mevate Jimbi Dersendo and Chajashi Tawakataki Chajashi Twende and Sabo Yindang Kandeina and Gachewa Yindang Kandeina Dindesina Hagosna Logic Dersendo. 네, 디게 된 된도 소소 출리신도 또 외반나 아니양 지 추기 때르세요. 데네데 자원인의 점바 맞은 심니 대외반나 양숭 점바 미제바 짐바르 제베나 숭기 때르네요. 다디로 때 데네 셈젠라 노출 자원인의 미비고네 데네 렉바 셰베 지토나 디 포비 때르도 네 타와카다기 차자시 마임바 추 마임바 타와카다기 차자시 랑 양다버 짐버테나 아니 추기 때르나요. 네 데이터와 추된 냠는 전에 랑니 상계네 신심진 텐솔라 디기 된데 양양 땜비고네 네 동지 리규 바르마체바 다 산지기 남니 남나 드에게 리규 추기 주바든도 바르마체마 군조 장주기 셈게 때르나요. 데네 데 출신도 랑게 냠네 진네 안에 지 먼저 교토와에 다지 먼저 교류베나 단디 또비 때선디로시네 뽑이 때침 뭐 게스 다 단지 시와델라 안에 뽑아서서 양답을 바스 딜라 안에 타와카다기 차자시기 안에 된된조 낭와스네 로제로 낭와스는 낭당대얌 다디기 된데 로라 샤르당 디기 된데 심라 요당데 간에 뽑이 때침 뭐 게되게 조비고네 베나 템바 베나 로드 베나 추 베나 숨 다나신 뽑아 다나스 군조 장조 셈 다나스는 게 되네 주바 추 딘데스는 툭라 요데베나 다디 낭와스 다디 똑바디 때르낭신 레스 레도스.
So we said that the ready speech or courageous eloquence is explained in light of the 8 great treasure minds of courageous eloquence. And that refers to the way that they appear in the mind of the one who teaches, for example, the 4 seals of Dhamma, the GtK seals. And so by again and again remembering the meaning and the words of the 4 seals, then one has remembrance. By knowing the full extension of how these are profound and vast, if one knows the entire profound meaning of these 4 seals of Dhamma, then this refers to the aspect of intelligence or wisdom. Then if one really realizes the meaning of the entire teachings, specifically here the 4 seals, then this is comprehension. If one recalls it without leaving anything else, without leaving anything out, then, and having perfectly internalized it, this is the recall. Being able to teach the 4 seals and just the Dhamma in generally continuously, being able to teach like this is then courageous eloquence. And to teach them for the benefit of sentient beings refers to the Dhamma. Then the seventh great treasure mine is enlightenment, and that refers to the fact that if one upholds the teachings in this way, if one teaches the four seals of Dharma in this way, the bloodline or the lineage of the Buddha will be uninterrupted. So the tradition will be uninterrupted, and there will be people who continuously practice. And then the last one is accomplishment.
Tempa, lote, tokpa, ane sung, the popa lesson, popa, digela tene, che soso yandama, digela tene, kunzop changju sem, digela tene, drubi terz, tamadela.
Jupiter de la Deshikantis Nangway.
Jupiter de la Tawakata ki chaja shigi dende rangi nyamlen cheni undun jurba.
And the last is the great treasure mine of accomplishment. And that means that one has completely, through practicing these, has completely been able to manifest or realize the meaning of the four seals of Dharma. So these are the 8 great treasure mines, and this is a way of presenting how they appear in the mind, how they are present in the mind of the one who teaches or is to teach the 4 seals of Dharma or the Dharma in general. And if these 8 aspects that we have just enumerated are present, then the mind of the one who teaches the 4 Dhammas is really like a treasure mine, and will be able to produce the teachings, like teach the teachings uninterruptedly.
Tene direng macho da zo kenjugi tanda de jeja de ane kebine ju ane chugi domshi ane soso yang da bujba shis odindesne yebinangne ta tanda tangbo ane kebine juice tene kebine jugi nangne yang ane tanda pungbo la kebas ta di kabla lepte re pungbo la keja shebi kaptela yang ane ta pungbo de la ena namba ngas de sugi pungbo chore pungbo duji gi pungbo duje gi pungbo nambar shebi pungbos odinde nga yebe namne de tambo sugi pungbos din mala ta dangong tangbo nge la sugi pungbo rakpa chore pungbo dile sugle kyang chorwa de dos chau dile kyang duje de dos chau dile kyang duje de dos chau dile kyang namshe de be chau lamsang jigla thong matwa ngoshe matwa lamsang jigla ha kwe kale khabo dinde yoba charang ko ni ta rakpa de tambo ngola tente lokjung changshi tene chawa la juwe charang ge gorim gi taw tene dinde sungma redo dinde tanda sugi phungbo de la ta phungbo nane kyang tene phungbo sugi phungbo ko la yes.
So today, now we will continue with our explanations of the gateway to knowledge. And the gateway to knowledge is outlined by these 3 topics, by these 3 sections. The 10 topics of learnedness, of knowledge, the 4 seals of Dharma, and the 4-fold correct discrimination. Out of these 3 sections, we have started to discuss the first one yesterday, the 10 topics of learnedness. And out of these 10 topics, we have started with the first one, the aggregates. The aggregates is further, the chapter on the aggregates is further divided into the 5 aggregates: form, sensation, perception, formation, and consciousness. And we started a little bit to talk about the aggregates and going towards the aggregate of form. Before we go into the text, into the section about form, I would like to mention, though, that actually the order of the aggregates is based on the fact that the prior ones are more coarse than the later ones. This means that the aggregate of form is something that we can comprehend very easily. We can easily relate to it through our experience. We can easily think about it and understand it. Understanding sensation is already a little bit more difficult because it's a more subtle kind of topic. Even more subtle than that then is perception, even more subtle than perception is formation. And the most subtle of the 5 aggregates is then consciousness, which is extremely difficult to understand because it's very hard to put our finger on what this actually is and how to correctly understand it. So the order in which we're studying the 5 aggregates here is based on the fact that if we first start with the aggregate of form, that's the most coarse or more graspable object, so that we then move to the more subtle topics afterwards.
데라 숙수롱위 생이 젠게 풍보 데라스 에나스 따들을 송래 데디 데라 숙수롱와 선데기 숙이 숙이 풍보 숙이 풍보기 생이데 된 땡기도 숙수롱와 따디 숙수롱와스네 강 라비바디 콜라양 마오네 lep기도 데네 단다드로 숙수롱와 생인데 딱 숙이 풍보기 생이데다 숙이 생이데 suks pungbo kabla shewege de suki tsinye de suks rumains den sungre suks tsinye tsinye pungbos suki pungbo delas dene enas gyusuk she tang jesuk chukchi gos ta pungbo ngai nangne tangbo suki pungbo digi tsinye de she ta dila ewa do ma chena jera do chena gyusuk she tang ane jesuk chukchi yos 나는 죽지 강라 아니 시감나 정한 수기 풍보들라에나 다 용돔 정한도와 주숙 시당 지숙 죽지
If we now look at the aggregate of form, and we are on page 16 of our text, then the explanation starts with the definition of the aggregate of form, which reads here, the aggregate of what is defined as physical forms. So the definition of form is that it is defined as physical forms. We will hear more about what this definition refers to later on. We will talk about what it means to be defined as physical form, or a different way of translating the definition would be what is suitable to be form. So that which is defined to be suitable to be form is form, and we will see what this refers to, what this really means later on. But first of all, it's just good for us to know the definition of the aggregate of form. So the definition is that which is suitable to be form. And that can be subdivided into the 4 causal forms and the 11 resultant forms. So form, the aggregate of form, has been defined now, and now we're looking at its divisions. How can we classify it? We can classify it into the 4 causal forms and the 11 resultant forms. Together, that makes then 15 different kinds of forms.
Tene nganzo tanda chedang ngomba la chö sanje ge chö ngomba gi chö singe la ngomba la changdi ga la ta thang pe cha chana thangbo khebe ne chu raw la yang de la yang je ena thangbo phungbo la ena yang ger nga la tene yang de su sha yang su la yang ger ena ju su shi de su chu tene re ene ta tene sene ma du ge de chu ngomba gi to dang de o tene sene yores chu tanda chu ngomba chu dulwa chu do de sene yoro wa tanda de su ta chu ngomba gi to dang de o tene ewa mama re ewa chin o den ta lok chung chang dang de ta to dang de o tene su chu ge de chine ta tan de zo chewa ngomba gi khong do yin du ta tene ma pe gi dos timala.
Actually, the gateway to knowledge is a Abhidhamma text that belongs to the Abhidhamma teachings, or the category of teachings of the Abhidhamma. And this is really the style that we find in the Abhidhamma. The Buddha taught 3 baskets. There are 3 baskets or 3 pitakas that we divide the teachings into. The first one is the Vinaya, the second one is Sutra, and then the third one, the Abhidhamma. And the style of the Abhidhamma is that it breaks things down in this way. So first we see that in order to become learned, we have the 10 topics of learnedness. The first one of those is the topic of the aggregates. The aggregates can be divided into 5 aggregates. The first one of those is form. Form can be divided into the 4 causal and the 11 resultant forms. And so on, and so on. So this is the style of the Abhidhamma teachings.
Da Yusuf shi de ne kabla gyune jungwa chimbo shi de da Yusuf shi la de kabdela de shung pechana la gyune jungwa chimbo shi de de Yusuf sina ne jungwa chimbo shi de la beres da de la jus na kansung re do sina jus na da jesuk chukchibo de ane jungwa chimbo ane shi de le kebar chebe bena jus ane ji jesuk chukchibo de ane ji yusuk shi de la ane ten ne tewa ane ji shi do chani tewe bena jus ane jesuk chukchibo de ane yud jungwa chimbo shi de la ane ne tewe bena jus ane yusu 시대 매송나 제수 축지 된조 미중와 콜라 땐네 중교회나 아니 유스 아니 단다 제수 축지보 데 망보 펠레야 당 근데 탐제양 데 유숙 침보 시디게 제외나 콜라 유스인데 어떤데 지라 유스는 숨기도 이네 중와 침보 시스 중와스 아니 중화스나 제수 축지보 된조 유딜레 때네 중기여배나 중화스 아니 중화스 아니 드네 데 유수 시보 때라 신양 중화스네 랍고와데 아니 심정기 라나 심진게 레기 왕게 대 중화침보 시대 중이면나 중화스 어딘데스네 윤이 중화스는 되는지도
So if we first look at the causal forms, then we should look at what makes them causal. Why do we call them the causal forms? These are the four elements. In the text it says causal forms are the four primary elements. So first of all, why do we call them causal? Why are they causes? They're causes or they're causal because of a few different ways we can look at these elements, the four primary elements, in the way that they constitute the basis and so on for the resultant forms to arise. So the four causal forms, they constitute the causes which make the resultant forms arise. They are the cause for the resultant forms to be supported. They're the foundation for resultant forms to exist. They also are the base. They make they cause the resultant forms to abide, and they are also the constituents of the supported. So of they're the constituents of the resultant forms, and they cause any increase, any flourishing, or any increase of resultant forms. So in this way, they do constitute the cause, from different angles that we can look at it, they constitute the cause for the resultant forms. That's why we call them the causal forms. And why do we call them elements? It's because they are elements, they're parts of everything. They're aspects or they're elements that constitute all the resultant forms. And another way to look at it is they also called the elements because they're the elements of arising that arise due to the karma of sentient beings since beginningless time. So based on that, there is this continuous appearance of the four elements.
네. 중화 첨보 시대에서 첨보 네. 된 이제 제수 된족이 제수 죽지보되게 시 댄사 안에 빼 갸첨보 진데 임베나 제수 첨보 제수 죽지보되 댄사리로와 댄사 임베게 또 첨보세 데가라다지 시암단 뇌도 뇌체 잘라루서 뇌체도 답에 제수 죽지스나 빼 갸첨보로와 제수 축지보 함제 숑사게 뇌 첨보 임반한 신기라 땐양 콜라 유수시디라 첨보스네 나바레스 아니 신양 제수 축지보 가와 연나양디 유수시디기 캡되어리다 안테인도 고민나양 첨보 나바레스 네 유수 첨보데 가와라 이제 연나양 안데라 제수 주지의 내 대여배나 아니 디 첨보스 다 첨보도 된다고 된저리도
We call them the primary elements. And an alternative word translation here would be the great elements. Why do we call them primary or great? It's because they're really the basis, the support for all the resultant forms to arise, and therefore they are actually extremely vast. They're great. They're extremely important, or like they are present everywhere. They're the very foundation for all resultant forms without exception. So that's why they're so vast, and that's why they are vast in terms of they're everywhere. And if we think of it as a vessel that holds all resultant forms, then it's huge, right? It's great, it's huge, it's vast, because all the resultant forms fall into the vessel of being held by, or they exist because of the primary elements. And we can also think of them as great, as very vast, because wherever we go, whatever we look at, this is pervaded by the elements. There's no place we can go, nothing we can look at that is not pervaded by the elements. So in this way, we can say that because they're really the primary building blocks of everything, of all form, of all resultant form, then these primary elements are the great elements.
네, 대대는 시대에서 중앙 윤의 중앙 정보 시대 시유스 다디 유수시도 수수레라나 강강대레람나 되네 사추 멜롱 디 시부데레 단디 시부데기 양 라랑 수수기 천예당 지레든서 양원에 내기도.
So, and if we ask then what are these four? We said there are four primary elements, right? What are these four? The four are earth, water, fire, and wind. And the definition of each also follows now below.
사이 감네 사싱스 때데 천예데레 안에 시즘바르 집에 레제바스는 데데 안에 거기 젤레데 내가 지당데 안에 사생나 베 탁보데레스 사싱 책바스다 안에 거기 젤레데 가르르스는 뭐보다도 탐제마 사도 마주니 코야 진네 심네 대교레스 야 땡네 대교레 라비케차.
The first of the four primary elements is earth. And here it says the earth element is solidity and its function is to support. So solidity is really the definition of what this earth element refers to. It means it is hard. And to be the support is its function. It hinders things from just falling into thin air. It supports things.
네, 니바 추이 감네 추이 랑신데 천니데 가르레람나 셰르와스 렌신 셰르와스 아니 거기 젤레데 마 토르도 마중네 추 루룩소에라고 지금 어딘데스 두바스 디네 디젤라 메 랑신데 조 차우데레스 메 천니데 아니 거기 젤레 내가 가르치게 됐으나 추 민그 주게레스 베나 싱도 된조양 추르 주게 라우 나 베나 수고 된조 야야 치르치르 죄도 되네 단다 최에게래 민밀에 받치게 됐을 때 룽게 감되게 룽게 천니데 양신 요와스 구제 땅 대화나 시당한조 단다 강당 강이나 구제 땅에 요와데 베나 파출죄 요와데 배차샤나 강당 강 구제 땅에 요와데서 탐제 룽유에 된다게 제스 때 룽 양시 요와 되게 되네 펠와르제 스디가라 되네 야마 요비 고네 아니 고 망도 땅에 저지 로 어딘데기 내가 지기도 쓰는 제레 천년지당 제레지 천년지당 제레지 되는지는 시도 그런 거지 봐고.
The water element is then the second one. The water element is fluidity and cohesion. Water is defined to be wet and fluid, like wetness and fluidity. And the function that it has is that it causes cohesion, meaning it brings things together and holds things together. Fire, then, the fire element is defined as hotness and burning, and and the function that this has is that it brings things to ripening. That means that fruit, for example, comes to ripening, and physical bodies grow, and anything that comes to ripening comes into maturation is based on this element of fire, which is heat, and which is
되네.
let's go. And the wind element is defined as that which is motion. So it's defined as motion, and its function is to allow expansion. So motion means that any kind of movement that we see, things going back and forth, any kind of movement like that is based on the wind element. That's its definition. And that kind of movement allows that things expand, that they increase in number or size, and so on. So that's the wind element. And what we have seen is that in our text, these are always described by first the definition and then also the function of each of these elements.
되네. 제 교수시 꼴라 슈스네 되네 니바 제수 꼴네 제수 죽지 대부 속대 대부 속 공부되라야나 죽지여스 왕봉아 미나나체 류스네 왕봉아 당 되는가스 속자 지로 렉자스 딩아 대주 주치 안에 이제 뭔가 저기 룩소라 네 로베 인이 이제베 뭔가 저기 룩소라 안에 넘버 레체 멤버 숙스 디샤네 죽지 차기도스 안에 양 뭔가 군두 로베 토메게 제베 뭔가 군두 길룩소 따나 양 왕봉아다 되는가 되기 땡돌라 양 최기 개체 바이 숙스 이제 디디샤네 안에 죽지 차기도스 다간다르 케바르데 뭔가 저기 룩사 넘버 레체 마임베 숙디샤 죽직스 는 양문바 군두 따도 양 원봉하다 되응아이 땡둘라 양 최기 개체 바이 숙스 디데샤네 죽직스 다 숙죽직 지당데 다 나나 주데다 자우제 아니 제마데 라난 소소레 도스 마라레 샤네 인데 지난도.
After having completed the 4 causal forms, then we can move on to the discussion of the 11 resultant forms. And the 11 resultant forms are first the 5 sense faculties, which are eye, the nose, the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, and the body. Then the 5 sense objects, so visible form, sound, smell, taste, and tangible objects, or fabrics. And so, or textures. And this is the same in all traditions. We have the 5 faculties, and the 5 sense objects. Then the 11th of the 11 resultant forms depends, the explanation of that depends on which tradition we're following. So in the Abhidhamma Kosha by Vasubandhu, the 11th resultant form is described as imperceptible forms, and Asanga in the Abhidhamma Samuccaya speaks about mental objects or the sense source of dhammas. And so while the first 10 resultant forms are the same, there are slight differences in identifying the 11th resultant form.
De chela susurungwa de suki tsingin yinsene tani yakang la dine sumre de de ta de susurungwa singin de kande imbe kola din ma sungi du supung de ta rekpa dang jebi go ne susu yo par sha des rekpa dang sena lakpa la so ba gi rekpa thu ba rekpa do gi din de dang jeba sena samlo gi rekpa gi samlo gi indes ji samlo gi go ne takchen do samlogi nangla sharwa tawji tinde gi chebi koni soksu wasene tinde shagi yo bar shades.
And we said previously that the definition of form is that it is suitable to be form. And here now comes the meaning of that. On page 17, the paragraph 1.6 says, these form aggregates are defined as having form by means of contact or inference. So when something is something that has form, then, or that is suitable to be form, then there are two ways of coming to a conclusion about that. One is that objects are something that we can touch, that we can experience. For example, by touching it, coming into contact with it with our hand. That is one aspect of the aggregate of form. If it's something we can grasp with our hand, that we can touch with our hand, then it is form. And the other way of finding it is through inference, like defining what is form is through inference. So if it is something that can arise as an image in our mind, if we can analyze it through our thinking and come to a conclusion about it as a thing, then if it arises in the mind through our analysis, then that can also be, that's also form.
Tene de la dangbo rekba de kola sungido dangbos lakpa dang yukpa dang lungso ke tukre yoba dang ta suksurungwa sing tonda de karires na tonda nigi sungiyos rekpa dang chebe ko ta tambo rekpa sene lakpa dang sa ta ngajo lakpa ki regne rege yoba den ra lakpa ki chokche la regne chokche la rege yoba pesha shana rawa ani yukpa dang sene gyukpa dende ki gyabna ane gyukpa ki dungna penna tene ma soya raw gyukpa ki gyabe ki ma marpo shala tene penna chunda marpo chungya raw penna tati tuge rekpa yobara penna lungi ane changmo lebe yobara lungi chine kolak denzo tang tra denzo inde guye tangi yoba tarsho denzo yogi yoba oti raw ane pecha shana tanga sokdegi nangla penna megi tsigna chubru tunya raw pena rawa megi tsagyoba pena lung changmo tang kawa kyakpa tenzo ke chungsungna ane yang pakpa ki kangla changmo ki buru tenda changburu tunya rawa ane je tuktul la soba tul tenzo muga raw tang ki la soba muga na yang ma tunya yoba raw 된조 렉바 생데 어디 렉이 된다 레스 숙수롱와 생데 렉바기 된다 다디 투게 당 렉에 당 어떤 어디 렉이 된다 지라냥 나비요 레스 송아래도 올해 신양 단지 아주 저거 도기도 와 저거 돈이 수군요도 저차 탕체 저 용기도 온된종 근데 수수롱와디 인비 된다데 어디 레스 송기도
So we said that forms can be defined both through context and inference, or touch and analysis. And first, here we find a discussion of context. What does context refer to? The first case refers to the fact that it can be touched by a hand, a stick, the wind, or by other things. So forms can be touched by, for example, a hand. Like we can touch our table with our hand. So that's then a form. Or it can be touched by a stick, meaning one can hit something or someone with a stick, and then that shows a result, like it creates a wound or a discoloration of our flesh. So that's a different kind of contact that happens and that has a certain result. So by being beaten like a stick, by being beaten by a stick, or that can lead to discolorations or wounds. Wind can also touch things, and we see that, we become aware of that because wind can move things around. So when the wind touches a flag, then the flag moves back and forth. When we come into contact with the coldness, then the skin first might get goosebumps, and then cold blisters, and we might freeze. So these are all ways that we physically come into contact with different kinds of things, and therefore this constitutes contact, and that if something can come into contact with something else like that, it's form. Another example would be an inner experience. If we're touched by hunger and thirst, then our physical energy will diminish. We'll get if we're hungry and thirsty, then we might get tired and sluggish. So these are all different ways of of touch, of contact that happen.
The nipa nyambar shapam mashapi tokche ke so tin titawo she traure sungwe so that nipa sedikada cheba bonela rekpa tan cheba niwa cheba de nyambar shapam sen nyambar shapas na penang zo lu la ni xianchang mangbo na lu de la kingru ge namba la kombas na ni semla kingru namba komni tenani kingru semla share jera on denzo de tawla ming na yang de jebi goni suk sing de jinde tang ham yana nyambar ma sha bi tok che ki pena sem nang la pumba awo kawa wo o tinde sene samlo la chi khurge yorwa o tenzo yi tok che ki suk pumba ne tinde je suk I tinde sangi pumba o sergi pumba o la taw sambarwa tinde sene sem nang la pumba ki namba salvoro chi trawara sungiro on di ming la jebi suk sing o tinde res sungane.
So that was then the way that things can be defined as the form aggregates or as aspects of form aggregates because they are something we can touch, come into physical contact with them. And the second case, the second kind of scenario that lets us define something as form is then to what is called here inference. Maybe we might think of it as analysis, examination, something like that. So the second case of inference implies a certain form can be clearly perceived as being such and such by either the composed meditative frame of mind or by the conceptual frame of mind not composed in meditation. So what this refers to is that one can clearly perceive through one's analysis certain objects. They arise in one's mind. So in meditation, for example, certain images can become very vivid and clear. If one has a lot of attachment and desire, then there is the meditation on the human body as a skeleton, as just the bones. And when the meditator, in the meditative absorption of the repulsiveness of the human body, by meditating on the body as a skeleton, perceives the body as a skeleton, that is then this analytical kind of form that arises in the mind of in the frame of mind of a meditator, or in meditation, in meditative absorption. Then there's another kind of mental object that can arise, an analytical form, which is conceptual while not being in meditative absorption. And so if anyone just thinks very hard, if one thinks about a vase or a pillar and tries to bring to mind a certain ways, whether it's a copper or a gold, and thinks about the vase, then its aspects become clearer and clearer, and the image of the vase arises in one's mind. So that kind of appearance, the arising of the vase in the mind, that also allows us to say that this is a form.
디 숙수롱와 생데 간데 임비 꼴라 디 계제 슈사네 아니 교수 시대한 슈사레다 제수 죽지디 꼴라 데네 데라 왕봉 안에세 다 왕보 데라 나여스다 왕보스나 랑율라 왕체베나 왕보스 라난 소소 단다 왕봉아 맥나나제 라난 소소 그 율라 왕체베나 아니 왕보스 라브레스 디 왕보 데라 메기 왕보 대신도 나이 왕보 나이 왕보 제 왕보 르디 왕보 스텐데 왕보 나여스 소리.
So we have seen now the definition, the explanation of how we define things as form. What does it mean when we say it's suitable to be understood as form? It's through either being able to touch it or through being able to consider it through analysis. Not to consider, but for it to arise as an image in mind through our analysis. So these are the two ways that things can be categorized, that they can be identified as being form. And we have also already seen the causal forms, the 4 causal forms, and now we can move on to the 11 resultant forms. And those start with the 5 sense faculties. What is the definition of a faculty, of a sense faculty? It means that the 5 faculties are what take hold of or take possession of their individual objects. And when we divide the sense faculties, there are 5 of them. There's the eye, there's the ear, there's the nose, tongue, and the body faculties. So these are the faculties.
네, 왕보 ngabo tita rangrangi sheba is wangbo miki wangbo la soba ngabo tensogi rangrang suzugi sheba miki wangbo gi sheba mikhe nai wangbo gi sheba nashe nai wangbo gi sheba nashe je wangbo gi sheba jeshe lüge wangbo gi sheba lüshe odidi sheba tensogi 다보 지겐 이러와 셰바 된줄라 드네 다보 지겐 메게 셰바 될라 숙통에 제도라 겐 로바 다보 지겐 다겐 베티나신 라랑 수수비 투몽 마임바 투몽 마임바세나 답에나 이제 믹셀기 코롱기 디 숙통에라 로바 지게요베 개차라오지 믹셀기 디마 노에라 로바 지게요가 투모 마임바 딘데기 로바 지겐지 아니 딘데지 인스 딘데 남기 숙제엔 당바데스 단 남기스나 나주 단다 미기 왕보스나 나주 단다 믹 단다 두루지 통되기도 하 믹라 근데 지 리지지도와 디디 마레스 디기 남라스 남기스 숙제 당와스 숙 임바지라 빼 장마 이제 살보 빼 쇠보 라우지 예를 계자리 당바 때에
The 5 faculties are the particular ruling factors for their respective cognitions. So when we talk about the 5 sense faculties, the eye faculty, the ear faculty, the nose faculty, and so on, then they are what facilitates the arising of a certain cognition for the eye consciousness, for the ear consciousness, and so on. It's the ruling factor that allows the consciousness or the cognition to perceive the object. So the eye faculty is the ruling condition for the eye consciousness to arise. The ear faculty is the ruling condition for the ear faculty to arise. The nose faculty is the ruling condition for the nose consciousness to arise. The tongue is the ruling condition for the taste perceiving tongue consciousness to arise, taste consciousness to arise, and so on. So each of the faculties functions as the ruling condition for their own consciousness, the specific consciousnesses to arise. So that makes them specific. There are certain objects, sense objects, that they facilitate to be perceived by the respective consciousnesses. So they're specific. They're not all-encompassing. So they're the ruling conditions and they're specific. And so they're the ruling conditions for the respective cognitions. And then when we consider what they look like, what are the actual faculties, then the eye faculty itself is not the the eyeball that we can see like that in its entirety. No, here the eye faculty itself is described as a inner subtle form. So there's a very subtle form. There's very clear and yeah, vivid, subtle, transparent, clear form that's inside of the eye, and that thing is the actual eye faculty.
네. 단나가지고 샤이데 믹당 나당 되는 냄초 된저데 대 왕봉하게 된 내사라고 시자사라고 된데 송에 왕된
our physical organs, our sense organs that are made up from flesh and so on, those are actually the support for the eye faculty, ear faculty, and so on to abide. So the eyeball or the ear, they are just the support for the actual sense faculty, which are these inner subtle forms.
네. 메기 왕보 sarme medo taus da de wongbonga de kande yo de nangere megi wongbo de penna medo sarma lagende chaw yores sarme medo sa sarme singinde gi medo de nangshi chonda thinga yimba jigla ane gogo nan de yores da na shenge na nai wongbo de 싱 조가선 싱지민나 싱 조가 라긴 주사래도 이 싱델라다 제르와 싱된도랑도 제르와 얘기도 앞에나 싱되게 tum데 싱 동보되게 이제 술술된데라 제르와 얘기도 안데 제르와 인데 주리 캡샤교는 신지 nenchokte 싱 조와기 제르와데 주리 캡샤교는 신지 요레스 아니 나이 공부대 상기 목합시 받다오스 되네 상례 소샤교 컵 차우 된다는 수분 남네 존나네라 인제스네 초 땅샤교로 된대요사래 상기 목합시 받다오스 제 공부대 다와 라우지 제레기 대 단다 제레 텐데기 남로라 되네 다와 게 대반능신 도지 동자 충충제 요제사린데 다와 도지 임바지라 게 대조 도지 충충지 류디 왕보 대페나 자렉나 잠기 빡빡다오스 자렉나 잠 신되게 빡빡 베녀오 잠보 tin데 요사리는 디낭신신에 되는 류기 나랑 속에 단다 땐게 류기 빡빡대 당 낭로 샤니기 parula pardela tene te luigi wangbo tare na jamgi bakata o singde ti yobe kechando de ta wangbo na de wotindes muzin na re.
How do we then understand these subtle forms that are the sense faculties that are based on the sense organs? We have examples here how they actually look like. The shape of the eye faculty is similar to the round and blue shape of the umaka flower. So the subtle form of the eye faculty, we can think of it to look like like this specific kind of flower, and when it blooms, it's round and blue. And the ear faculty is similar to the shape of a twisted roll of birch bark. They're sort of kind of tree, right? The tree, the birch tree, and around its trunk grows this special kind of bark, like the skin of the tree, and it rolls off into these fragments of twisted rolls of birch bark. So the ear faculty inside of the ear organ looks the same, looks like that. Then the nose faculty looks like two very thin copper needles that point outwards through the nose. And the tongue faculty then is like a half moon, like a just the sickling moon, like a moon sickle within the tongue. And it's probably quite small, actually. So when the moon is very young. And then the last one, so I didn't read them. The nose faculty is similar to the shape of parallel copper needles. The tongue faculty is similar to the shape of a crescent moon disk. And the body faculty all covering similar to the skin of the smooth to the touch bird. So the skin, the body faculty is present, doesn't have a specific form, but it's like the skin of a smooth to the touch bird. There's a bird that's extremely soft and pleasant to touch, and it has this very special skin, and that's like the body sense faculty. And the way that we understand it is that it is in between our actual skin and our flesh. The body faculty is everywhere between our flesh on the body.
네. 니바데 되는가네스 제수 죽지나네 되는가데 강강이 있는 슈나 소타 디로 렉자스 딘조인스 근데 네 소데네 미기 율데스 미히기 숨자르 주와 소기 게치기 체니스 다딘데스 게자줘레 미기 숨에 주와스 단다 데캅기 소데 당양 야강기 속 풍부의 값이 속되라 다 에와 체시 지고래 속이 풍부가 속되 캡침보 도지래도 봐 에시 도지 단다디 에와 제라 도지로 난디 속되나 단다디 속되 믹시기 양박이 숨에 말이지 야 강라 속된 저나 타지도 믹시기 숭숭어자 많이 봐요 사례디 불라 대인도 갑라데네 다디 당보디 속니 믹기 율데스 다텔라 속데라 양 에나 카도기 수당 서양 이기 수니스 다들라 카도들라 양 안에 자위 카도당 연락이 카도스 니샤레 카도 탐지기 중사데 자와데라 몬보 세르보 카르보 마르보데 자위 카도스 자와스는 중사데 탐제 카도 연락 카도 탐제 중사 디신스
So these were the 5 faculties, the sense faculties, and now the 5 sense objects are the second set of 5 in our 11 resultant forms. So the 5 sense objects are visible forms, sounds, odors, tastes, and textures. And they are defined to be the objects for the respective sense consciousnesses to arise. So, for example, visible form is the object for the eye consciousness. And here we have to be a little bit careful because it mentions forms. And in the translation, we already see the visible to clarify this, but in Tibetan, it's not, the visible is not explicitly mentioned. So it is called form, is the object of the I consciousness. We can't confuse this with the form aggregate. The aggregate of forms is more pervasive, is a umbrella term for all sorts of forms, while the form that we're speaking about here now as visible form is much more limited in its scope. So the aggregate of forms, the forms that we were speaking about generally as the aggregate of forms, that's the basis for any kind of division, while then the visible form that we see now here as the sense object is one of the divisions and subdivisions. So here we're only referring to the visible forms are the objects for the I consciousness, while the forms in terms of the aggregate of forms is much more pervasive, is a much more inclusive term, including also other kinds of forms, not only visible forms. I just wanted to clarify this here. Now, visible forms are the sense object of the I. That's the definition. They can be divided into two types: color forms and shape forms, or colors and shapes. And concerning the first color form, the four primary colors are blue, yellow, white, and red. So we can divide visible forms into colors and shapes. And the colors are further divided into primary and secondary colors. The primary colors are blue, yellow, white, and red. And they're primary colors because they make up all other colors.
네. 디 연락이 카도라 찐당 남칼라 찐지도와 디 남칼라 찐 코롱 나라브레 찐 코롱 안에 맞아 매당나 두알링이라 두와 안에 룽잡네 탈라든야 남칼라 추디갈라 탈라지도와 둘 안에 콩나세나 안에 묵 단다데 묵바 안에 나분 어떤 소리스 되네 님마게 왜 아니 님마 매비 깝게 데 짐나 짐마 되네 님마 샤르데 깝게 양 낭와 양 체모 어떤 소 탐제 인스 양 연락하도 셰양 몬바르 깝요 바 셰바 숙셴기 고갑 제게 요베는 몬바르 깝요 바 셰바 속대 숙셴라 토파르 제바당 렉바르 자와당 달대와 벤나 바낭라 꺄승에 제 바낭 벤나 낭와 저지도와 꺄승에 온디랑 몬바르 깝요 숙스 숙년 된조 양 추능이 숙년 멜로나니 숙년 된조 양 대단 자오제스네 몬바르 깝요 숙생시 제도왕 가동 연락 착설왔다고서 넘버를 아니 땡기 원보 맞아 소자불링기 땡기 남카디 원보 독치도 온된 조양 가도 직바 남대 대남장 숙수 뒤비 체도라 아니 따지랑 카도스나디 숙수 뒤비 체도라 시행인 라게 자리도 뭐랄까 그래서 카도스구나 좀 있어요. 카도기스구나. 자, 살마다 된서 카도스구나 두개나. 입기 속대 오그네리기라. 단다 카도기스구래 시디가.
So the secondary colors are cloudy and smoky and dusty and misty, sunny and shady, light and dark. These are then shadings, or like these are the colors that are included in color that have to do with For example, the actual clouds, like the clouds in the sky, when they're those that's the falls into the category of color, that is refers to the form, the color form of cloudiness, of being cloudy. Smoky is the smoke, the color of the smoke from fire. Dusty is when we have a lot of wind and the dust is swirled up into the air. Misty comes from fog, like we have fog that's misty. Sunny when the sun shines, shady when there's shadow. Light during the day and dark is at night, the darkness at night. So these are the secondary colors. And on top of that, there are also some other things that are considered to fall into the category of color forms. So we have the primary ones, which are the actual colors that make up colors. And then we have these other things, right? And another thing that falls into color form, into the category of color form, is spatial form, which is a spatial form is a visible form, for example, pure, clear space, free from something tangible that impedes other things, reflections, and so forth belong to this type. So these are other things that we might perceive and fall into the category of color forms. Something else that we perceive in a similar way are perceptual forms, such as the act of prostrating, the uniformly colored blue sky, also said to be included on visible forms. So in the way of classifying these kinds of phenomena in the Abhidhamma, there are the primary forms, the secondary forms, the primary form colors, the secondary form colors, but also spatial form and perceptible forms, and they're all grouped together into this category of color forms. We see that because shape forms are still to come, so they do not. When we divide form into color and shape, they do not fall into shape, but they're grouped with the real colors into the color category.
진바 코롱 카도 아니 두아 코롱 카도 진바 이 카도 센틴데 인사 말이 두아 이 카도 센틴데 인사 말이 니마 이 카도 서버 센틴데 인사 말이 니마 그 코롱 카도 진바 코롱 카도 두아 코롱 카도 차살와 된절라양 넘버 리제 마인바스 인데 숙된 나저 믹시기 송자르 교바 넘버 리게 요와 토틴데 믹스 마이나양 고 차사와 다우스 딘데기 카도 어디에서 샤인서리.
So also the secondary colors, they're not the color of the sun or the color of the clouds per se. They are the cloudiness in itself. So they're not the gray of cloudy does not refer to the gray color of the cloud, but to cloudiness itself. The sunny would not refer to the yellow color of the sun, but to the brightness or the sunniness of the sun. So these are not really colors as we understand them, as of red, yellow, and so on, but they are objects of our eye consciousness. they're perceived by our eye consciousness, and therefore they're grouped into this category rather.
So 내로 참시하기 되는.
I will stop here for today.
모에 추즈로디양 인데 jel고로신 초게 다도 콘도 다저로데 로저 베모 랍도 제제 산제 템바 다르신 제바라에 쇼 장축 심조 렘보제 마제 번남 제저로제 제와 냠바 메바야 공내 공도 펠로와라 쇼 소남데예 탐제 세바니 톱네 예베 잔남 팜제 Genga nache balab chuba ye sipe chole rowa rolobara sho.
I forgot again. So please write a magic word. That's the question for today. Please write a magic word. That's the question
I have
for today.
Inkala, I have some questions. So should I send you by email or should I just post here in Teams?
You can also fill out the quiz. But if you are refusing to do the quiz, you can also send it to me because you don't care about your attendance. But if you send it in the quiz, then I have everything in one place. That would be good.
Okay, I'll send by the quiz. I'll send in the quiz. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
What's the question?
Right.
What's the question?
Please write a magic word.
What kind of magic word?
A word, like whichever one you want.
So the answer is magic word, correct? So
You can no, it's any kind of word that makes magic manifest. It's different in different languages actually.
Oh, okay.
In German we use hex or Okay. Yes, we have a first review class later. Rachel, tonight is a little bit in an hour. Yes, we have our first review class today. And we do the same material always on Friday, so Did anyone else have trouble with the audio today? Moon had some problems. Could you let me know if it was it something on her side or was it something? There was some interference at the monastery, or some people making some noise, but did the audio cut off for you? Okay, so Moon, it was on your side, I think. Yeah, there's the interdependence. There are different causes and conditions that play into a good transmission. My internet, Lopan's internet, your internet. Yeah. So let's hope we can all hear each other.